Today on Independent Wrestling Profiles, we're talking with the loud ball guy, CJ Peapod Owen. When did you first discover professional wrestling? What's your earliest memory of fandom?
Oh man, it's always fun to get into that. I first started getting into wrestling. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but all I remember is WCW Monday Night Nitro was a thing, and my father would come home from work, and he would put on wrestling just to kind of decompress and everything. But at the time, I had a very staunch 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time bedtime, so I can only catch like the first portion of WCW Monday Night Nitro, and I was just kind of infatuated and interested in like the people. The wrestlers, the costumes, the pomp and circumstance, which is very appropriate because Macho Man Randy Savage was there, so the pomp and circumstance, as always. Yeah, it was something I was very interested in. My father would always tell me beforehand, like, hey, that guy's going to win the match. And like 9 times out of 10, he was pretty accurate just by entrances alone. I don't know how he figured it out or, maybe what, but this is before the age of the internet and, things like that. My father was just a casual watcher for wrestling. As I grow up, around middle school age, around the time, and to, I guess, frame it, the big storyline was Triple H just married Stephanie McMahon. Mm-hmm. So, like, that was the big storyline for that one. That's when I was getting into. So it was roughly around, like, 7th grade. So I would say, like, if I would work backwards, I graduated high school in 2004. So I graduated elementary school or like middle school around 2000. So that's roughly like late 90s or early 2000s. That's where the age where probably when I got into wrestling actually went. It's like the tail end of the Monday Night Wars, things like that. I always say that the big event, I can always throw this out. My very first live WWE event that I went to was the event that Shane McMahon bought WCW.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, I always like to throw that out there. And I'm like, yeah, I had, I was there in Cleveland, Ohio, where when I saw that. So and like the more and more I grew up, I like graduated high school, I went to college, joined a college radio station that would just like broadcast to like the campus and a little bit beyond that, and people can listen online. This is before the podcasting boom happened, and I got some of my closest friends. We did a Saturday morning pro wrestling talk show, so we talked about a little bit about like what's on the television, what's our feelings about it, results. TNA was still like in an infancy, so we were talking about that and things like that. And also like a little bit of we did a little bit of like independent reviews, interviews, things like that. We went to like Ring of Honor back in the day, like sometimes in like Detroit or Dayton, Ohio. So it's like where we were in Toledo, Ohio, Northwest Ohio. It was like an hour to go north to Detroit, or like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to go south. For like the shows in Dayton and everything. I remember going to like Chikara, a live event when they were starting to like break out of the East Coast. So they were doing a little bit more. And I remember going to their very first show when they were trying to get out of like the Pennsylvania loop. And they did a show in Cleveland, Ohio. So I was at that show. And like I was like diving like headfirst into the whole world of wrestling, not only on television, but independents, the Mexican scene, the Japanese scene, the English scene, all of it. And I just like absorbed it all, that I wanted to be like everything, like follow everything, a little bit of tape trading, a little bit of like going wrestling forums. And then people like had like the broadcast and they posted on these secret links and you had to download it with my slow ass internet from in college and everything to watch it. And I just got infatuated. There was a period of time that I stopped. It was right around the time, and this was like now he's, I think it's like 11 years now. But like one of my best friends, and who was part of that whole college radio show, very early past, unfortunately, and I kind of stopped watching wrestling for a hot minute, because that's how like all of us got together. And then I got back into wrestling right around when the very first All In happened. And this is the birth of AEW, not like so like Cody and the Young Bucks and everything put their own like self like pushed out show, because I thought that was fascinating, that just like a group of wrestlers put on their own show, which like on the independent scene, that's like a regular thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like on a like big mainstay like people, especially someone like Cody Rhodes, who I remember being on television, things like that, and some of the people that I followed a little bit on like the early days in like Japan and whatnot, when they were in junior heavyweights, and Kenny Omega and all them, putting on like their own pay-per-view show, and like sold out Chicago, and like it was just insane to me that I watched it, and I watched it with my friends, and I got like enthralled back into wrestling then, which was really cool. And then I kind of fell into becoming a commentator, which was really funny. The first thing, like, first off, I was a former radio broadcaster for 11 years. I was part of one of the two major corporations in the United States for radio. One was called iHeartMedia. The other one's called Cumulus Broadcasting. I was part of Cumulus Broadcasting out of and like their branch out of Toledo, Ohio, and I was in there for 11 years. I graduated college with a bachelor's in communication from the University of Toledo, and then about 6 months out of school, I joined in at Cumulus, and I started like behind the scenes stuff, and then I grew and grew and grew. And of the 11 years of being in the radio industry, I was part of on air for 7 of those years, and then of 7 of those years being on air, 5 of them I was on air as a morning radio personality. So like I would always like influx, like I would have like little radio wrestling themes in between stuff. And I fell into wrestling because of a local company, because I always like to have the spotlight on local people, local companies, and good people doing good things. Of a little company called Ruthless Pro Wrestling. That was just launching, or was going to be launching there in the spring of 2020, which we all know what happened then. But that's another that's a different podcast to go into that depth of things. But I was interviewing the owner and whatnot, and helping promote their show, their very first show, and then obviously COVID happened, and when that got delayed, I left the radio industry because once again COVID kind of put a damper, kind of put up a ceiling on a couple of things. But honestly, it was the best thing that to happen to me personally and professionally, because it got to the point where in the radio industry, I could have only done so much, and they weren't going to do anything with me, unfortunately. So I left, and I, did do other 9-to-5 jobs and career paths and everything. But the people that are running Ruthless Pro Wrestling was starting to, launch their show. They did a couple of like backyard shows. It's a deathmatch company. But they were doing stuff locally also at there's a school here in Toledo, Ohio called Skull and Bones. It's run by TNA's Trey Miguel. Also a gentleman named Crimson, who was in and out of the Midwest wrestling circuit for, I want to say, a good 10 to 15 years. Did a lot, probably headed up to Canada. I'm sure he's done some stuff, like not like majorly known, but enough to like know a thing or two about a thing or two. And we were doing a couple of shows at their school as like just safely, everybody's like safely distance themselves, and everybody had to wear masks the entire time. It was only invite only and everything, but it was just like a live show to record, and then they would upload later to IWTV. And then they're like, hey, you have a great voice, you ever imagine to be part of being a wrestling commentator? And I was like, I mean, I like wrestling and I like talking. Obviously, that's why I'm here. Why not? Why try? I try it. And who would have thunk that years later that I would be doing something like this? And I fell in love And I did so much with Ruthless Pro Wrestling, and they recently announced that they're going to be closing their doors, unfortunately. But that was my first go into wrestling, and then since then I've grown my own style, my own brand, and everything, and now I do commentary for. I want to say like close to like 12 companies now across Midwest, a little bit into Canada. I also do some international work as well as doing English commentary for a Taiwanese company called Puzzle. So it's been a wild, weird world, and this April will be 5 years for me, and I love doing it. I love helping to tell the tale of wrestling.
Speaking of telling the tale of wrestling, I kind of want to explore that transition into the commentary. So you had the
Mm-hmm.
radio experience. You're talking. You're very comfortable. That's not a problem. But how
Mm-hmm.
did you find the adjustment to the importance of conveying the story and the excitement and adjusting the way that you talk specifically to the action that is taking place in the ring? Like, how is that transition? How is that I'm assuming it's a constantly evolving thing, but
Yes.
did you find that that was a fairly smooth transition, or was there something that you really had to work on? Like, just take me through that journey.
It's a little bit of yes and no on that journey. Obviously with radio, what people don't realize for radio that there are very timed segments. So you only have X amount of time in between songs that you could talk to, or segments that you do on a morning show. You can only do so much time. So you're kind of under like a little bit of a window, of time to like kind of get your things in. So you're not like going over and we're talking over the song, or you're taking too much time that people will start to turn off because, in modern radio, it is all about like people listen to the radio in like 10 to 15-minute chunks. It's a rarity now that people would like come together and sit down and listen to the radio like they used to do back in like 70s, 80s, 90s. The transition into commentary, at first you're just like you're trying to kind of emulate what you hear on television, and then you realize that like it's more than that. It's you have to like learn how like everything ticks, and you are the storyteller for wrestling. You're the narrator of the story. That's what I always love about being a commentator, because you kind of have like one foot as a worker and one foot as a fan. So you kind of have to like know and how to be the bridge between both of them, and really guide the viewer on why these two people are fighting, and why is that important, and answer some of the questions that somebody as a fan would have if they're just tuning in for the very first time. I always like to emulate the idea of like how comic books work when it comes to my commentary. Anytime you like read a comic book and then somebody makes a reference, and then you see the little asterisks and like the little box and go, see issue 849 or whatever. I kind of like doing that a little bit, of just like, hey, if you're jumping into X company and you see Y and Z people, fighting, then we can give you a background on A, B, C, and D details of why these guys are. Why is this person so tough, or why is this person hit so hard, or why is this person champion, but not completely spoon feed you the entire time, because we obviously want you to watch product currently, and then maybe hopefully in your back time, either watch some of the previous situations or the back catalog of something, especially when it comes to independent wrestling, or jump on and then continue watching with us. So developing that style, there was a little bit of a transition because it's a little bit more long form, and you also got to learn, when to talk and also not when to talk. A big idea, and what I've learned over time is like the broadcaster in me that thinks that like, oh, dead air, that's bad, I got to keep talking. While in wrestling, you actually need to learn to when to not talk and let action breathe and let situations breathe, because if you're constantly talking, the viewer is going to have a hard time listening. But if you're not talking at all, the viewer is just going to be bored and not going to be excited about what's going on. And then also like it's about learning more also of like how to communicate with some of the wrestlers and how they do their matches and their shows and what they do, and always communicate with them before the show about like, hey, is there certain things we need to make sure we pop for, or we want to make sure that we want to hit on like character wise, or like is there certain moves that we need to be like, oh, this is an important move, what do we need to do? And some wrestlers will like sit me down and will go, hey, this is all that's going on. And then some wrestlers will just be like, whatever. And like, that's always the hard part of just like transitioning and figuring out what's best for everybody. But I always say on different platforms and like to wrestlers as well and everything, like we want to help you. Oh, excuse me. We want to help you get over. We want to help your character be interesting. So let us, determine that. And then sometimes you get the opportunity of doing it yourself, and like they will run with it. Perfect example is recently in a show that I did. It was a match between three figures, and one's a champion who's kind of like who's like a bad guy, who's a heel. There's one guy who's like an even bigger heel, and then there was one guy that used to be a heel that just recently came back as a face. So you're like trying to like determine how do you juggle all of these personalities, and like the biggest thing that I did. Me and my commentary partner for this company for this match did was like we just like quasi turned our champion who's a heel in like a face, and we were like, this guy is a jerk, but he's upfront about being a jerk. He's not trying to be slimy. You already know that he's scummy, he's slimy, and we appreciate that for him. And he's our champion, and we got to respect him being the champion. And so like you get to kind of play around with some of those moments as well. But like, there's also moments that you need to also like have the hard lines from either the promoter or the wrestlers themselves, and making sure that you get certain things over, because again, it's a balancing act between, as a commentator, between the story that the promoter wants to tell, the story of the match that the wrestlers are trying to tell, and the story that you need to help tie everything together that is digestible for the person watching at home. Much like radio, where you had to balance like the music and the sponsors and the segments and everything like that. So there was a little bit of a transition of learning how to balance on everything, but it's still also a lot of it was just trial and error. I tell people that I'm only this good, and I put this in quotations because I don't want to sound like an egomaniac. I'm only this good just because I had experience in knowing how to talk into a microphone. That's it. Everything else has just been like a trial and error situation. It's just I understand what my role is in the grand scheme of a wrestling show, because it's not about me. I know what I am in the dish. My wife's a self-trained chef, so you all know how to, like, if you watch enough Food Network shows or whatnot, or cooking competitions, you know how like a plate of food is proposed. I'm not I'm one spice in the grand scheme of everything. So if you use too much, you're gonna ruin everything. But if you don't use enough, it's not going to bring out all the flavors and everything you need to do. Commentary is the same way. If you're a bad commentator, people will just get turned off by you. But if you're a good commentator, you will only enhance everything.
So you had talked a little bit about preparation, like talking to the performers, and I'm sure there's probably some watching tape and things like that. But I want to speak about afterwards, and this might be a little controversial. You don't have to name names. But did you ever have a scenario where after a show, somebody was like, hey, you forgot to highlight this, or hey, you didn't make this sound very good, or maybe they were even just flat out offended. I can't believe you said that about me. I know you're supposed to make me a heel, but you might have crossed the line. Have you had any of those kind of trial and error moments that were maybe a little bit more negative?
I've never had that last one, thank goodness. Knock on wood. I know a lot of people that end up playing heel. The more you make them hated, the better they would be. So, but yeah, there have been times where like I will forget a name, or I would forget a move name, or I would forget like certain plot points, not even forget or like misspoke of plot points, or how much time certain people would be in, and a lot of that is like trial and error. Again, I have notebooks in front of me that is like for every little different company that I do work for, and I get so much information, but sometimes I just like there's only so much room in this brain of mine. And some of it's just a mistake. Luckily, I'm always, I don't take too much to heart. I understand that, like, you got to just get better over time, and the more and more you do it, the better you get. It's like a muscle. It's like working out. Only instead of me, learning how to lift people up, I'm doing this, and I'm thinking more, and then I'm thinking ahead of like how to do that, how to present them in better ways. It's great that like more and more as I do more in the wrestling world, I'm learning more about like the thought process from a promoter or a character standpoint, that I can actually like give my 2 cents and help develop more things for a character, for a wrestler. I've had some wrestlers come to me and ask for my advice on like a promo or like how the presentation is and everything, because not only from my marketing background or my broadcasting background and presentation background, but like for wrestling in general, because I can see how the fans are responding, and I can also see how promoters and whatnot are responding as well. And, also, how people are responding on social media and everything. I take all of that into account on a character, and I think more people should, and understand that more of that marketing background, that social media background, like a lot of those factors, a lot of wrestlers like, and this is not like an insult or anything. It's like a lot of wrestlers concentrate more on like the physical items of everything, how a match is put together, how they physically look, the gear, things like that. And that's great and all. But the small things, the very small things, the promos, cutting a promo for God's sake, making sure like certain things and graphics and pictures when you post them on one social media platform, make sure they also fit on the other social media platform. It's the small things that like a lot of wrestlers don't understand, that I think they should take into account as well, especially in this day and age where it's the social media realm, it's the digital realm, and we literally have cameras in front of us the entire time. How things are being presented throughout everything. So you kind of have to go into effect in all of that. I'm not saying you need to be in gimmick the entire time, but I'm also saying that there are small little things that people don't consider, that if you're not from a marketing background or have a marketing 101 basis, you wouldn't understand on how that would work. That's just my like 2 cents on certain things. Again, like it may be a little bit different because I'm not being slammed onto a ring canvas or onto questionable objects on a weekly basis, or I'm getting some sort of head trauma during that as well. I get it, but also it's one of those like, my brain works in a little bit more of analytical ways, that I want to bring those analytical standpoints and those marketing 101 standpoints and business 101 standpoints into professional wrestling, because every wrestler is their own business, is their own brand. I've seen people like, Mike Quackenbush on his YouTube channel, like give all this advice. I've seen like regular wrestlers or like, the regular coaches speak about this. And like a lot of people just like one ear out the other, but like they're saying these things because it works. It's like the bare necessities of getting yourself over. You can do 600 super kicks and Canadian destroyers all day, and people will be wowed by that. But also, if you really want to drive somebody in to buy your shirt, to buy a ticket, because you are doing so well online, your business, your presentation and everything, if you get more people to the show because you're there, because of your acumen, it will help the businesses and the promotions do well at the end of the day, because one more person, one more like on a page, one more person going to a show, one more person coming into something means more dollars for everybody at the end of the day.
So I do want to sidestep back to that balance between professionalism and fandom. And I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
presume that you get starstruck or anything like that, but you came from a wrestling fandom. So was there any sort of surreal moment where you were maybe caught off guard? I can't believe I'm commentating on so and so's match, or I can't believe that I'm doing this, that I'm actually a part of the industry. Do you have any of those moments that really stand out to you?
Every freaking day. Like it doesn't feel real. There are wrestlers that I was a fan of, and then I would or work at promotions and then have the opportunity to work for them. Like a perfect example, I recently just did commentary for CZW's Tournament of Death just a couple of months ago. CZW was one of the big companies when I was first getting into independent world, was one of the companies I would watch. Ring of Honor, the Ring of Honor CZW feud was like one of the very first things that I saw out of Ring of Honor, and that was in the like like mid 2010s. That was huge for me. There's guys that I've like literally seen old matches and old tapes of, and now like they are regular contacts, and they're excited to see me because I got to call some of their stuff as well, and they hear my voice and my style, and they're excited to see me because of my work, and I'm excited to see them because of their work. So like we're all, the idea of like someone calling somebody a mark in while you're in the business is always funny to me. Because we're all marks. Like that's why we're here. Like somebody did something, and us as fans to go, wow, I want to pursue this. It's crazy, but like it's still like any opportunity. I'm always forever humble about anybody who gives the opportunity for me to help tell their tale or give me a stage or like answers their DMs about being on their podcast or whatnot, and just go like, help tell your story. Like it's just mind boggling to me. This world, the wrestling world can be frustrating, can be stressful, but it also is like the most wonderful thing I've ever been a part of. And I am more emotionally fulfilled from pro wrestling than I ever did in radio in the 11 years I was in it. I also joke that radio got me prepared for independent wrestling because it's kind of the same realms. So like I just tell people, I was like, oh, crazy drama, people dangling the carrot and then getting away from you, doing a lot of work for little to no money. Yeah, that's radio in a nutshell, really. So I'm used to that. But like all in all, I would not change a thing for my current path, and I like where I'm going, and hopefully I will be doing this more because I want to do this until I can't. I want to go as high as I can go and go from there. I would love to make a living doing wrestling on the regular, and not only just like commentary at a show, but commentary at home and some of the design work and some of the editing work. I always want to be a person that can go to a company and go, hi, I'm CJ Owen. I can do X, Y, and Z things at a show, but I can also do X, Y, and Z things at home and also help you with X, Y, and Z things for your brand. And everybody will hopefully like what I'm doing, or they'll just leave me on red. That's fine. But in all, I love what I'm doing, and I'm glad I'm here.
So you had touched on opportunity, you had touched on the path that you were taking. So where would you like to see your career go next? I know that ultimately, yes, making a career of it, but is there
Yes.
some destinations that you'd like to work in, some companies that you'd like to work for, even some performers that maybe you haven't had the opportunity that you would love to call their match? What's kind of on the bucket list for the more immediate future for you?
I'd like to start hitting like more of the upper, excuse me, I'd like to reach some of the upper echelon companies. The bigger named companies, especially on the independent scene. Like I said before, I recently did work for CZW. I would love to do more with CZW. I'd love to go to the West Coast because a lot of my work right now has just been like the Midwest, greater area. I've done more traveling this year into places like Texas and Wisconsin, and I'm based out of like the Ohio, Michigan area, and I do shows in Indiana. I've recently this year have been going into the Canadian market, more in Ontario. I'll make a debut for a company in Toronto coming up. So I would like to do more, but I'd like to go to the West Coast. I've never been to the West Coast. I would love to do work in the West Coast. I would love to go overseas. I would like to go to a foreign country. I mean, Canada counts, yes, but also like I want to go. I can reach Canada in a 2-hour drive from where I live. So while cool, yes, don't get me wrong, that's not an insult. Canada is huge, so I would love to explore more of that circuit. But I want to go to like Mexico or Japan or England. I want to go like I want to be able to get to a point where someone pays for a plane ticket for me to go and do commentary for them. That's one of the biggest things. I'm always infatuated about calling more names and bigger names and international names, because like to me it's not necessarily like a wrestler themselves. It's more of like the places and the opportunities and the types of walks of life to go to, and the different countries and states and cities that I can go to. That's what I get more excited about, is all of that. I want to leave my house and go to another city that I know nothing about, that I want to try their cuisine, or I want to go and explore them. And then I want to see their wrestling scene. And I want to see some of these wrestlers that I can go back to my promotions around my tri-state area and go, hey, this person's really cool. You should try to book them, and make those connections too, because I love connecting people with people. That's what I always love. Like I've been telling a lot of like companies, in the areas that I do, hey, Ontario has like a really dope wrestling scene. There's some really good stars up there. You really should check them out. I fell in love with like a lot of the people in the Canadian scene with my work at like Norfolk County Championship Wrestling, with my work with Canadian Deathmatch. A lot of good people, even for Sharp Wrestling out of Toronto. Like I've really been, loving a lot of the talent that I'm seeing in Canada, that I want to bring them over down here in places like Neo Pro out of Ohio, and Fantastic League of Wrestling out of Indiana, and Super Shogun out of West Branch, Michigan, and all sorts of places that I do work for, because again, I want those people to check out other people that like I'm always like a big fan of just like, hey, these people are doing fun things and they're doing good things and they treat people well. You should come too, because we need more of that. We need less people that are actively trying to cut the legs out from other people, and we need more people to help support other people and promotions and doing that way. You always hear about, oh, so and so doesn't pay, or so and so it doesn't pull well. Okay, well let's talk about people that actually do well. The mentality of it, if it bleeds, it leads, is an old news and media term, because that's why like. When you look in the news, especially in the States, you see like it's a murder or fire or whatnot. If it's something bad, it's the first story. Well, let's try to change that narrative, and especially in a world of pro wrestling where it's unfortunately inherently carny. We should actively do our best to improve it, so we can get more people into shows, more people can watch the wrestling, more people can support these people, and it can be a better experience overall. That's what I'm trying to do, little by little, but I do all right.
So I do want to ask this question out of my own personal curiosity, and I'm fully prepared for it to be, a dead end question. But in your travels, though it isn't as big of a circumference as you would like yet, have you noticed any sort of regional differences? Not necessarily just for commentary, but how the performers are maybe structuring their matches so that it does ultimately cause you to adjust it. But have you noticed any sort of, maybe regional cultural differences between how the shows are run?
That's a really good question. I will say in my travels, Um, a lot of stuff in wrestling in Michigan is very, how do I put this? So Michigan is like one of the most saturated wrestling scenes that I have seen. You throw a rock any weekend and there's like 6 companies running. And unfortunately though, they're using kind of the same handful of people. There are companies that break that cycle and book in a very different way, in a different style. Um, I'm noticing a little bit with more of my work in Canada. I'm very interested in seeing how a lot of people how they're being presented is something that I've noticed a little bit. Something like NCCW, which comes in more of a blue collar area of Ontario, is more of a for lack of a better term, a wrestling show. Like, and I know you've had Adam Martin on and some of the other folks that does NCCW, and I love doing stuff for NCCW. I'm very excited to do more with them. They are presented with it being a wrestling town, so like the smallest things will show big dividends in a lot of shows. It's not necessarily a bad thing at all. You want to kind of go back into those, the simple things. There is a discussion about how like today's wrestling is more of like big moment, spot based, shock factor style of move sets, and then you forget about like kind of the core things to do. Like somebody, for a perfect example, somebody like MJF doing like the same bit almost in a sense of Rowdy Piper did when he was alive. It's so refreshing to see somebody go back into that old school of thinking and working and wrestling that you don't need to do again the big flips and everything. Don't get me wrong though, everybody loves a good flip or whatnot. Hell, I do too. But I love the idea that in certain places in Canada are going kind of back to basics. And I really appreciate that. While like some in the Midwest, in like the Michigan ski, everybody comes out and everybody kind of does like the wrap around and high five people and everything. And like sometimes and like everybody does that. Every wrestler, heel, face, tweener, everybody does the walk around of the entirety of the ring. And I understand that like playing up to the crowd and everything, but sometimes you don't need to do that. You can get back to basics. There's a lot of what I call all meat, no potatoes style of wrestling, where it goes, kind of like when you think about like mainstream, somebody like Walter, that's like not flashy, no pyro, comes in, wrestles, chain wrestles, gets in and out, and does the thing. I remember watching somebody like him, before he became Gunther, do that on the scene, and I was always very interested in someone like that. Big guys doing, I'm also a big sucker of like the big guys doing like dives and like cruiserweight type stuff or lucha style stuff. Like I always love doing that, and I love like how that has developed as well. What I'm noticing more about, like at least in places like Michigan to like Canada, for example. Canada has like a lot of good character work. Somebody like Pretty Ricky Wilde, for example, is a great example that like very good on the character work. Another guy, Rashawn Husher, that I'm a big fan of. Is really big on the character work and the presentation of it, which goes back to my conversation about how you present yourself on social media and all those things. A lot of people here in the Midwest could learn a thing or two about a thing or two. The bare necessities of like, I never understood of like not doing a promo. You turn your phone on, you turn the camera on, you shoot, you point at it, you go, this Saturday I'm gonna beat you to pieces or whatnot. Like that's it. Like that's the bare necessities. Obviously you got to do more than just that. But like the idea of like that is you have to like pull teeth from And like in somewhere, like in some of the other places, and I'm sure maybe it's the same problems, and I'm just noticing differently because of rose-colored glasses. They I see more work on the character side than I see down here. That I think what I'm noticing. But I like I said, I wanted while traveling more and seeing some of the styles, and I end up seeing some of like the same handful of people depending on where I'm going, especially during certain companies or whatnot. But there are people everywhere I go that are you can tell that they're putting time and effort in their character, and then you can tell that there's some people that do wrestling as like a weekend getaway, and then they go back to reality. And there's nothing wrong in being either one, honestly. But I can tell when somebody really is like trying to learn more about how they are doing. They're taking time and energy about how they're being presented. They're taking time and energy about how they talk, how the character work. They're in the ring doing, going over the matches before show starts, things like that. And then people that just kind of come up, Josh in the background, and then do the show. Like I feel like there are certain people and places and things that they're filled with more places and people that really want to do their thing well, and there are people that are just there to just be there. And again, if you're one or the other, that's great. I just personally feel happier in seeing the people that are really taking the time out to really hone their craft.
Okay, so the last question that I like to ask everybody is revolving around a piece of advice. Usually it's the most important piece of advice that you would have liked to hear when you were just starting out wrestling. You have a bit of a different path because you're a commentator, not a wrestler. But if there
Right.
was somebody who, they have a voice for radio, they love wrestling, but they don't know how to get started, what's like the one piece of advice to somebody who is an aspiring commentator that you would put forward to them?
I would say really listen on how commentators tell the tale, but don't try to emulate them constantly. There are people that I have worked with that do a very good job of developing their own style and their own way of doing commentary. It's more than just knowing the names of moves. It's answering a lot of the questions of why is the biggest thing that I spoke about before. Of like, okay, wrestler A is facing wrestler B. Okay, why? Even if there's not a story, make something up. Make a reason why, or concentrate on something that would be very interesting. Hey, this person strikes a lot. They're a hard striker. They do a lot of chops. You got to be careful of them. They've concentrated more on that stuff. You can build upon a story, even though if you don't know much about the wrestler, you didn't get much from them. They're still green. You can help develop them. That's the best thing about where we are at as commentators. We can kind of lie a little bit and nobody will know unless somebody goes, hey, don't do that. And then you can go, okay. So that's the biggest thing. It's like really listen on how people do things, but then don't necessarily try to emulate them constantly. Don't just go onto a microphone and start yelling. Don't go and try to figure out every single move, because I screw up move names all the time. I couldn't tell you how many times do I screw up belly to belly to belly to back suplexes all the time. Because you think that one move is someone landing on their back from a suplex is a belly to back suplex. No, it's technically a belly to belly, depending on how it is. It's more than just that. It's understanding the whys of everything, and it's also just presentation and knowing your basic broadcasting 101, holding the microphone. If you're going to start getting louder, maybe go a little bit, back and lean back a little bit. If you're getting a little quiet, learn where you are and developing your own style and skill and everything. If you want to get into the business and just want to help and behind the scenes, start much like anybody else, like as a wrestler would do, is just like go to the place, help set up, help tear down, help clean up, That's always the biggest thing I tell like young people, like if you want to wrestle and if you're not a wrestler, but you still want to, be a part and you want to be part behind the scenes stuff, still go there and clean up after the show because more people will pay attention to you if you clean up after a show than you setting up chairs because there's tons of people who want to set up chairs or set up the ring. More people need to be there at the end when they're trying to clean up and absorb and listen and do like that. As a commentator, it's harder for any of us to, be booked because a lot of promoters don't understand whether they're on streaming or not, or they're just going to upload their stuff on YouTube and everything. They get like a buddy of theirs that know nothing about telling the story or everything. The commentators are usually the last person they think of. So try to develop and try to make sure when you go to a company, that you can offer more things to them off their plate. Hey, we need somebody who can run people out. Hey, we need somebody that can handle social media. Hey, we need somebody who can help handle graphics. Hey, we need somebody to help edit the show. Hey, we need somebody to help shoot the show. Learn those skills as well, because I will say that more people will need you in some of those aspects than just another person setting up chairs.
It's great advice. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to get involved, just find a way to get involved.
Yes, exactly.
So before we sign out, can you just let people know once again who you are and maybe where they can follow you on social media to keep up with what you got going on?
I am CJ Owen. I am the loud bald man. I'm also known as Peapod, especially in the deathmatch world. I am your friendly neighborhood professional yeller, and you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at CJ Owen Calls, the number 4 and the letter U. You can also email me as well. I got link trees. I got links to stuff. I can be found on, on plenty of companies on IWTV, on IndieWrestling.us, on Title Match Network, and Millions.co in the Midwest tri-state area, and hopefully in more places coming next year. And I appreciate you listening to me yak with the good people here tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Independent Wrestling Profiles. Please help out the show if you can with a like, subscription, or review. We'll see you next time.
This program is a proud part of the Swear to Pod Network.